Thank you very much for coming. So this morning I'm going to look at prosperity types and the definition of the four fields. And this afternoon I'm going to look at the temperaments of the four fields, what happens when you go in the wrong field, and summarize the whole book. So I'd say the more important stuff will be this afternoon, but without having come this morning, you'll struggle to understand what happens this afternoon. Okay, we're like laying a foundation here. If you're interested, we have oops, sorry about that. We have in the works a complete online course. We also have in the works an audiobook. So right now this book is available in print and ebook online. But we do have an audiobook in the works and a full online course. We also have in the works a workbook. If you would like information about when those are released, then if you just capture this QR code and sign up there, we're not a big organization. You'll not get an immediate email confirmation. We're not like Amazon or something. But we will have your name, and we don't flood you with email. We'll just simply let you know when those are available. Are you or anyone you know in a situation where your working life and your spiritual practices are out of balance, whether or not you know what your ideal career is? So we're going to learn and begin to implement the 9 principles of career Dharma so that you're well on your way to achieving deeply satisfying career success and harmonious balance between your career and spiritual life. So you'll be able to identify your ideal career field and prosperity type, progress towards Dharmic mastery, and learn the secrets of making your work deeply meaningful. You'll start applying the principles of devotional living to your career, and your career will thus enthuse your spiritual practices with deep meaning and taste. I'd like you to imagine that your daily life has gradually come to include all the practices you've always dreamed of. That you love the work you're doing, what you're producing, how you're making a meaningful contribution. That your work is bringing you the kind of prosperity that truly enriches you and that you joyfully share with others. And now imagine that the whole world was like that. One of the main things I was looking for when I joined the Krishna consciousness movement was something that could be holistically spiritual. Not that we basically lead a materialistic life, but sometime every day we have some little spiritual practice. Some way in which I could spiritualize my life. And something that would teach an ideal socio-economic system. What's wonderful about the Vedic literatures is that not only do they teach the practice of enlightenment and pure love of God, but they also teach how to have a perfect socio-economic system for what Srila Prabhupada called 195 times peace and prosperity. So career Dharma involves identifying our ideal career field and prosperity type, learning the secrets of making our work deeply meaningful, going beyond that to progressing towards Dharmic mastery, and the whole system for peace and prosperity. And this encompasses 9 principles of career Dharma, and I'd like it if you would read these with me. Connecting our nature with our livelihood, advancing through life while nourishing our nature, extending our prosperity to others, ethical and meaningful work of value, delight in cherishing our prosperity and field of work, having celebrations of the sacred in our life and work, above the shades of ego, maintaining societal balance, cooperation between the fields and competition within the fields, all-inclusive sustainable prosperity. So what we'll be focusing on today is mostly number 1, a little bit of number 2, a little bit of number 4, and then my last one I'll be just summarizing everything, but in very, very brief summary. So Krishna tells us that we have a basic nature that cannot be repressed. For whatever reason, however we got it, we have some basic nature that cannot be repressed. And he tells us that by acting according to that nature, we can become perfect. That a path to spiritual perfection and enlightenment is through following our own nature. Okay, so first we're going to look at the 6 types of prosperity. This is in identifying our prosperity type and career field, principle 1, connecting our nature with our livelihood. So many times people think about career only in terms of money. How much money will I make? We say a successful career means you've made a lot of money. And that's often all people look at. Like I know when I used to run schools, the first question anyone asked was, how many children are there in the school? And I thought the first question should be, how are the children doing? How are they doing academically? How are they doing in terms of their character? And maybe the second question or the third question could be, how many of them are there? Yes? The difficulty is that there's not a one-to-one correspondence between money and prosperity and success. And we all know that. Yet we somehow or other go on as if that were the case. So I'd like to ask how many of you have ever met, heard about, know about, read about anybody who didn't have a lot of money but who had a rich, satisfying life? Have you ever met, heard about, known about, read about anybody like that? How many have you ever met, heard about, read about, known about anyone who had a lot of money and a poor, unsatisfying life? Right? All you have to do is read any newspaper headlines. Actually, we're the publisher that's going to be working with us on creating a workbook. She said that she's worked with many millionaires and billionaires, and she said this particular graphic perfectly illustrates what many of their lives are like. All right, I'd like you to write down, paper or phone is fine, a list of what enriches you. What makes you feel rich? What makes you feel abundant? What makes you feel prosperous? Not specific people or specific animals. And not just what you're grateful for. So not just like, clean water. So not your gratitude list of things like that. But what is there in your life that really enriches you? That makes you feel prosperous and abundant? Now I'd like you to take one of those and expand on it a little bit, maybe like 1 to 3 sentences. For example, something that really enriches me is beautiful artwork. So in the place where I stay, I have some nice, good quality prints that are beautifully framed. I like to make attractive PowerPoints. I like to produce beautifully illustrated books. I like to support artists and engage artists. So if you can take something like that, one of your points, and write 2 or 3 sentences to expand it. So according to the Vedic literatures, there are 6 ways of being prosperous. We're going to look at these one at a time. And for each of them, I want you to think about when you had this, especially when you had this as part of your work or as part of your service. When there are times that you didn't have it, how do you feel when you have it? And how do you feel when you don't have it? Now, when I say how do you feel, I'm not only talking about, I am talking about, but not only talking about I feel happy, I feel sad. Is it like, do I feel frustrated? Do I feel bewildered? Do I feel uninspired? Or do I feel encouraged? Do I feel enlivened? Do I feel energized? And what happens in your life? If there's things that are, because Krishna says we cannot repress our nature, if there's things that are really important for us to feel enriched and prosperous, and we don't have them as part of the majority of our working day, we will try to find them somehow. And often we'll do that in a way that doesn't really work for us or others. So it can also be like that. Well, if I don't have this, then how do I try to find it in some way? Now, there are a number of devotees who've asked me specifically, why do we care about what makes us feel rich and prosperous? Why don't we just care, you know, how can I make Krishna happy? Why are we even thinking about what makes me happy? So Srila Prabhupada says that all of us are like a cell in the universal body of God. So I'd like to ask all of you, do you want the cells of your body to be happy? Would everyone like their heart muscles to be happy? And your lung cells and your brain cells and your stomach cells? In fact, if they're happy, if each little cell in your body is happy, then you as a whole will be happy. Even if you're entirely selfish and you really don't care whatsoever about the happiness of those little living entities, even on a fully selfish level, you're going to want every part of your body to be happy and healthy. And every part is actually alive. So certainly Krishna feels this way. Also, we cannot even do proper service unless we get our particular type of nourishment. So a cell in the lining of the stomach needs a different kind of nourishment than a cell in the lining of the lungs. And you can't substitute it. So each of us, in order to properly serve the Lord, we need to be nourished in the way that's suitable for us. You know, according to Ayurveda, there's different kinds of healthy diets for different kinds of people. For example, if you're a very Pitta or Kapha person, you should probably eat more potatoes. And if you're a very Vata person, you should probably eat fewer potatoes. Right? And an expert Ayurvedic doctor will prescribe like that. Even for a healthy person, what kind of diet is going to be best to maintain your particular health? And it's not across the board. You know, in modern Western medicine, they might say, oh, this kind of food is healthy for everyone, and this kind of food is... But it doesn't work like that, actually. We each have a different kind of diet that's best for each of us. So when we're looking at this, this is not just about our own personal happiness, but when we're happy and we're healthy and we're properly nourished, then we can make our best contribution to society and to the Lord. All right, so we're going to look first at Aishvarya. Aishvarya is connected to what Sanskrit word? What Sanskrit word does it come from? Aishvarya. Ishvara, yes, which means controller. Yeah. So Aishvarya, sometimes Srila Prabhupada will translate this as just referring to wealth in general. But it literally means having a position of being a controller. So this would mean a titled position of administrative leadership, where there's people who work under your authority. You organize them, you coordinate them. You put people in the best positions. You figure out how they're going to work together. You bring together the resources. You make plans. You follow? Yes? So, for a long time, in the Hare Krishna movement, I was thinking that, you know, we put a priority on humility, and therefore I thought it was really bad to want to be a controller. You know, Srila Prabhupada often talks about that as the epitome of illusion. You want to control the world, right? You want to be a controller of the world. So I thought this tendency on my part to be a leader was something that I had to get rid of. I was always trying to not lead. I'm supposed to be humble, I'm not supposed to be a controller. I should try to not lead. And every time I found myself leading, I would say, oh, Urmila, this is not good. You shouldn't be leading. You should just be making flower garlands. So this was a recurring thought. So one year, I'm trying to think of when this was, 2001, 2002. I was in India, and I happened to be at one temple for a festival day, for Balaram's appearance day. And I go into the temple, and there's a table on which there were like 3 or 4 women who were making flower garlands. And I thought, oh wow, great, I can actually make flower garlands. So I go up to them and ask them. They didn't speak any English. And then the temple president's wife came up, and she told them, and although I don't understand Hindi, I understand enough to know that she was telling them that I was a very senior, respectable Prabhupada disciple, and they had to let me make garlands. So that didn't make me very happy. I just simply felt extremely awkward. So starting off feeling very awkward, and I sit at the table, and I'm watching them, and I knew how to make garlands by taking a threaded needle and putting it through the flowers. Wait, can everyone move forward about half a meter, please? 1, 2, 3, move forward. It's one of the purposes of ISKCON is to bring the member closer to each other. There we go. Okay. Yeah, you especially want to leave room between the last row and the chairs so that people can come in there, yeah. So anyway, I'm used to doing it with a needle and thread, like pushing the needle through the flowers, but they were tying the flowers onto the thread. It was a different technique. So I was watching them very carefully, and then I tried to do it myself. And the whole time that I'm doing that, these 3 ladies are going, this Anglese, this foreigner, you know, what is she doing? And the whole time I'm kind of like, you know, so I'm making this garland, and while they're criticizing me the entire time, and as soon as I finish, I'm like, oh my God, thank you, I'm done, you know. And I get up and I start walking away, and they just tear it apart right in front of me. Like I got 2 steps away from the table. And I thought, okay, Lord, that was a pretty clear message, you know, that maybe I should be leading instead of making flower garlands. But I still had some hesitancy. And then one devotee was working on his master's in psychology, and he asked us if we could help him with his research by participating in a personality test. So I said, sure, you know, we took this test, and then he met with each of us to tell us about our personality. And when he met with me, he said, Urmila, you cannot not lead. And it was kind of like, I thought my whole life I have been trying to not lead. And at that point, I accepted it. Now, Aishwarya is not at the top of my list as what's important, but I see it is something that enriches me. Like at this point, for the last several years, I've been the chairperson of the Shastric Advisory to the GBC. So there I coordinate the work of about 18 scholars and get 18 scholars to work together to write a paper. In America, we call that herding cats. But I enjoy that kind of a challenge. I enjoy the challenge of taking an administrative leadership role, especially when it isn't so clear-cut, and bringing everybody together and getting all it's something that I really enjoy doing. And for many, many years, I was a school principal, also doing that kind of work. Now, there are people for whom Aishwarya is just sort of meh, they can take it or leave it. And there's other people who really don't want to do this. I was teaching the overview of career Dharma last night, and one person came up afterwards to talk to me, and he said, I hate having a leadership role. He said, I want to progress in my career, and generally the track to progress means going into leadership. But I really don't like leadership. He says, I need to find other ways of advancing. There are many people who just want to work on their own or as part of a team, and they want someone else to take that responsibility. So I'd like you to think of when you've had Aishwarya as part of your work or your service, when you haven't had it, what happens with you, how do you feel when you have it, and what happens with you, how do you feel when you don't have it. next one is Gyan. Gyan means knowledge. So many of us have work where gaining in knowledge is an integral part of the work. Maybe as part of the job you have to do a lot of study, you have to do a lot of research. One of my friends who's a medical doctor told me that in order to be current in her career, she has to read at least 3 articles in her discipline every week. So for some people, this really enriches them. They want something where they're constantly learning, where they're constantly studying, where they're constantly researching. Other people are somewhat ambivalent about it, and other people really don't like this. So I've done in-service training for teachers, and many, many times, and 2 of those times I had a teacher came up to me and said, you know, I've already been teaching for 25 years. Why do I have to keep taking more and more training? Or people saying, you know, I really don't like to just research all the time. I learn what I learn for my job and that's it. One person that I spoke to recently who said, wow, I can see from studying this that I need to change careers, but if I change careers, I'm going to have to do a lot more study, and that's not something that I'm prepared to do. So I'd like you to think of when you have had Gyan as an integral part of your work, when you haven't had it, how do you feel when you have it, and how do you feel when you don't have it? The next is Virya. Virya means health and strength. So one of my friends works in construction, and he was telling me that one of the things he likes most about his job is how physical it is. He says if for some reason he doesn't have any work for a few days, he starts becoming restless. You know, I want to move things and build things. Another one of my friends who takes care of cows told me that one of the main things she likes about taking care of the cows is the physicality of it. She says, I like walking to and from the goshaw, from the cow shed, and just the physical work with moving around the cows. My daughter runs a classical dance, Indian classical dance, Bharatanatyam dance school, and one of the things she really appreciates is that she gets a full workout every time she teaches a class, because she's also got to be doing this very vigorous dancing. Now, Virya doesn't just apply to that kind of health. One of my friends runs an Ayurvedic restaurant in New York, and one of the things she enjoys about her work is that she has to test all the recipes herself, so that she's always eating very healthy food. Now, we're looking at all of these prosperity types right now in terms of what we're getting ourselves from our work. Our work also gives various types of prosperity to others. Right? I could be in a bookstore where I'm giving Gyan to others, and if I don't read any of the books, I'm not getting any Gyan myself. Similarly, I could be a dentist helping other people to be healthy, but my dentistry is not going to add to my health in any way whatsoever. So some of us really want to have Virya as part of our work in order to feel enriched. For others of us, we're ambivalent, and for some of us, we really don't like this. There are many of us who don't want Virya as part of our work. We want to work on our health as part of our recreation. We want to work on our health as part of our relaxation. So I'd like you to think of when you've had Virya as part of your work, and when you haven't had it, what were the results for you, and how did you feel when you had it, and what were the results for you, how did you feel when you didn't have it. The next is Shri. So Shri means kind of sparkly splendor. And it refers to many different kinds of beauty. So for example, it can refer to visual beauty, auditory beauty, olfactory beauty, beauty of nature, or some combination of those. Let's say you're a landscape gardener, so you're going to have the beauty of nature, you're going to have visual beauty, and you're going to have olfactory beauty. Shri can also refer to charismatic leadership. So this is a little different from Aishvarya. In Aishvarya, you actually have some position, some title, where you have administrative, managerial type of control. Again, Aishvarya, the key word here is control. So you can be an Aishvarya kind of leader and also have the charismatic leadership of Shri. You can have both of them, but you could also just have one. There are many charismatic leadership people who don't have any particular titled administrative managerial role. So Shri in your work is any of those or any combination of those. Again, my daughter teaching classical Indian dance has a lot of Shri in her work. There's the beauty of the dance itself, the graceful movements, the beauty of the music, the beauty of the costumes, the jewelry, the makeup, the set design, and so many things. So there are many of us for whom Shri is an essential part of our work in order to feel rich and prosperous. There are people who are ambivalent, and then there are people who really don't want to have to include Shri or have Shri included as part of their work. These people are very practical minded, and they're just, let's just do the practical things. This is just a bunch of frills. Actually, I had lunch and was spending some hours at one family's house in, trying to think of where this was. I think it was on the Gold Coast the other day. And I needed a place to work. So the husband said, well, you can use my desk. And as soon as I looked at his desk, I said, it's obvious that Shri is not very important to you. I said, I wouldn't be able to work at this desk. And his wife said, yes, yes. And I said, no, it's not like that. I said, it's important to you, but not to him. And he said, I don't have any trouble with this at all. And he actually said, I think this is a botheration. I just want to work practically on getting this stuff done, and I don't want to be siphoning off my energy into these things that are just frills. So I'd like you to think of when any form or any combination of Shri was an integral part of your work, when you didn't have any Shri as part of your work, or the parts that are particularly, any particular part. How do you feel? What happens to you when you have it? And how do you feel when you don't have it? The next is Yasha. Yasha means fame. Yasha is a specific personality in the Bhagavad Purana who's the child of Kirti and Dharma. Kirti means to talk about, and it's related to the word kirtan. And Dharma means what's authentic, what's good, what's real, what's righteous. So Yasha is when people are talking about you because you've done something worthwhile. Now, people who have Shri in terms of charismatic leadership may have a bunch of followers. They may have a bunch of people who clap for them. But when we're really talking about Yasha as part of your work, we're talking about something deeper and more authentic. Because Yasha is not just Kirti, it's Kirti and Dharma. So Yasha implies that you have some kind of community as part of your work. You're working with some kind of community, or as part of community, or as part of a team, where people show a lot of genuine appreciation, recognition for each other. Now that's different from working as part of a team that's just completely work-focused and task-focused. So I've been with teams where we're 100% task-focused, or 95, 98% task-focused. But you have teams that are not only focused on getting the work done, but also on being there as a supportive, loving, caring community. Now, for some people, this is essential for them in order to feel prosperous in their work. In fact, I know some people who can't even be productive without this. I've met some people where if you say, hey, can you get this done? Nothing will ever happen. And if you say, can you get this done as part of a supportive group? Everything happens. Yeah? Actually, I started on this journey many years ago when I was talking to one couple who were very good friends of mine. And the husband said, my wife and I are very rich because we have such a loving, supportive community of friends. And I thought, oh, it's a different way of thinking about wealth. So there are many of us for whom this is essential in order to feel enriched. I remember when I was teaching this in Zurich, one of the organizers came up to me afterwards and said, Urmila, I never realized how important yasha is for me to feel enriched in my work. Others of us are ambivalent, and others of us really don't like this at all. We want to get our community, we want to get our support outside of work, and when we're doing our work, we just want to focus on work. And we may see these other things as a distraction or as a botheration. Why do I have to go to another appreciation dinner? You know? So I'd like you to think about when yasha has been part of your work, when it hasn't been part of your work. How do you feel when you have it? And how do you feel when you don't have it? The last one is vairagya. Ragya means attachment, vai means without. And so this appears to be an anti-prosperity. Detachment. Equanimity. But it actually is another way of feeling rich. Vairagya can apply to having work that has a very flexible schedule, or where there's a lot of travel, or where you can live a minimalist lifestyle. Maybe you can ride your bicycle to work. It can mean where you work, say, as a criminal defense attorney, where if you don't develop a mood of detachment, you wouldn't be able to do your job. It might involve work where you're teaching a lot of forgiveness. Or it might involve work where you're just not dealing much with the social and emotional parts of life. So there are many people for whom vairagya in their work is really important for them to feel enriched. For other people, it's sort of ambivalent about it. They can have it or not have it. And other people really don't like this. There are people that really value regulation and security and having plenty of what they need. Right? I have one very good friend who's an intellectual scholar, but definitely is not into vairagya. Right? When she travels, she has to have 4 big check-in suitcases, and she was recently renting a place for a while, and I said, why don't you rent out your own place? She said, well, I can't do that because it's full of so much stuff. Nobody else could stay there. I said, what kind of stuff? And she said, well, I have about 10,000 books, and then I have all these artwork everywhere. And so there's a lot of people for whom this is really not something they want as part of their work. So I'd like you to think about when you have had vairagya in your work, when you haven't had it. How do you feel when you have it? How do you feel when you don't have it? So I'm sure as we've gone through this, you've come up with maybe 2 or 3 of these that you've seen are really important to you in your own work. Now, what's really sad is that sometimes people think, well, I'm not getting any of these in my work, or I'm not getting the ones that are really important to me, but I'm making money, and with my money, I'll buy them. Or they're thinking, well, I'm not getting these in my work, but I'll get them in the afternoon or on the weekends as some sort of hobby or volunteer work. The problem is that it's very difficult to exchange one prosperity type for another. Like if I take US dollars and exchange it for Australian dollars, and then I go back to US dollars, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose. We're far better off when we're directly getting in our work the kinds of prosperity that enriches us. And why should we feel impoverished for 8 or 9 hours a day, hoping that we're going to have enough time in the evenings for a half an hour of what we really need? So I have a very good friend who used to work as a traveling musician. He and his wife would travel from city to city in a van. It was just the 2 of them. So that he would have to unload and load all of his equipment. By the way, you're welcome to take as many pictures of these slides as you want, but I've also given Punyapalika here an electronic copy of the slides. So anyone who wants their own handy dandy copy, you can just ask her and she can share it with you. Also keep in mind that whatever I have here is a very brief summary of what's in the book. So there is far, far more material in the book than I'm able to present in the time we have here. Anyway, he was traveling from one place to another, And he would unload and load the equipment. He wrote his own songs, and he would put philosophical lyrics in the songs, although I went to one of their performances and you couldn't hear the lyrics. And so it was, also his wife was doing a lot of dancing, and there was a lot of colorful lights and things like this. What kind of prosperity was he getting in his work? Huh? Shri, he was definitely getting Shri. What else?
Yasha.
No Yasha. Was he part of a community of musicians? No. Vairagya, yes. By the way, wrong answers are just as helpful as right answers. Okay? I'm not asking you these questions as an exam. I'm asking you these questions as part of a learning experience. So all the questions I'll be asking you this morning and this afternoon, they're not exam questions. They're a learning technique. And learning what something is not is just as valuable as learning what something is, right? So we actually like to get wrong answers. I'm really serious. Because when I get wrong answers, then you can understand how it's not that thing, which is just as important to the learning. All right, so we have Shri, and what's another one? Definitely Vairagya. What else? Did he have any position of leadership and any management over anybody? It was just him and his wife. A little bit of Gyan and a little bit of Virya. So we had a little bit of Virya, a little bit of Gyan, a lot of Shri, and a lot of Vairagya, and no Yasha and no Aishvarya. So now he has a new job where he's a tour guide in United States national parks. So he studies in advance about the national park, what's its history, what kind of plant life does it have, what kind of animal life does it have. He often goes there in advance and checks out the trails. And then he takes people on a hike. It can be an hour, it can be a day, sometimes it's multi-days with camping. What prosperity types is he getting? Definitely Virya. Vairagya, yes. Shri and Gyan. No Yasha. It's just him. I mean, he has people coming through, but they're not a community that's giving him appreciation and recognition and support. And he doesn't have any Aishvarya. Again, he's not really managing people. Taking a tour guide through for a couple days is not the same as having some administrative management role. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, so he's getting the same types of prosperity with two quite different jobs. And we're about to study the fields. Both of those jobs are in the same field as well. They're both in the field of artistry. So understanding prosperity types can give us a good idea of specificity of career. And it can give us some idea if we have to change jobs or we want to change jobs, how I can find something that has the type that really nourishes me. All right, so I'd like now, if I could please have a volunteer. You could. Actually, what we should do first, before I ask for that, I'd like each of you to make a list in order of your priorities with these prosperity types. So make a list in order of which prosperity type is most important to you. Okay, is there anybody who'd like to volunteer to let me write their list up on the board and work with them a little bit? Okay, so what's your list?
I wrote Aishwarya as number one. Then Gyan, Yasha, Vairagya, Shri, and Virya.
Okay, can you turn so that you cannot see this board or the screen, please? Okay, if you had a job where you could only have one, you absolutely had to choose between Shri and Virya, you couldn't have both, you could only have one, which one would you take?
Virya.
If you had a job where you absolutely had to choose, you couldn't have both, you could only have one, between Vairagya and Virya, which one would you choose?
Vairagya.
Okay, if you had a job where you absolutely had to choose, you couldn't have both, you could only have one, between yasha and vairagya, what would you choose?
Yasha.
If you had a job where you absolutely had to choose, you could only have one, between gyan and yasha, what would you choose?
Yeah.
And if you had a job where you could only have one, you could only have either Aishwarya or Gyan, but not both, which would you choose?
Ashwara.
Okay, thank you. So he only had one change. Sometimes we'll have 3 or 4. On rare occasions, we don't have any. Yeah. Now, each of us is going to have a little different list. Yes? Each of us is going to have a little different list. So what I'd like you to do right now is, did you all pay attention to what I did and how I did it?
Yeah.
Everybody pay attention? If you didn't pay attention, don't do this exercise. Just continue to space out. If you were actually paying attention, well, maybe some of you thought that she's just doing that with somebody else. If you were actually paying attention, please work with somebody next to you, and each of you do this. Don't discuss what these things mean to you, okay? Don't do that. Just simply ask them to choose, if they had to choose, and help them to get their list in the right order. Okay? Can we do this? So each of you work with someone else, and each person should do it for each other. So this is a stylized drawing of the inside portion of the Gaudiya Math logo that was designed by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Prabhupada put this logo on the gates of our ISKCON temple in Mayapur. However, I don't know why, but the prosperity types are not written there anymore. This is the full logo. And again, you can see this on our Mayapur gates, but you won't see the names of the prosperity types. It just looks like a star. I don't know why they took that out. Of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati originally wrote this in Bangala script. We've written it in Roman numerals. And we had to redraw it because the old copies were all poor resolution. So we updated the printing press.
It's in the Manasiksha book.
Yes, we put this redrawing of it in the Manasiksha book. Okay, does anyone have any questions does anyone have any questions or comments at all about the prosperity types? Yes?
Where would the voluntary work come in the prosperity?
Excellent question. And that, in terms of what you're getting for yourself?
No, I mean let's call it the pleasure or satisfaction of just helping others. You're not necessarily looking at either holding a leadership position or yasha or kirti, nothing like it. Purely just happy by helping anyone.
Okay, well, voluntary work comes in the category of charity. Charity is the third principle of career dharma that we'll look at very briefly in our very last session today. And one of the things we mentioned as far as charity is in charity, you can not only give cash, but you can also give to others the type of prosperity that you enjoy. If you're enjoying Shri, give Shri to others. If you're enjoying Aishwarya, you can take a managerial position as a volunteer, or you can maybe help other people to become leaders.
So it's not necessarily a prosperity type, but it's part of the broader ecosystem where you...
Well, it is. It's a division of prosperity. It's a division of wealth. And just like you can give money in charity, you can give these prosperities in charity as well. You can help other people to be healthy. You can help other people to be detached. You can help other people to get knowledge. You can help other people to get beauty. You can help other people to develop community. You can help other people to become leaders. You can share your prosperity type with others. You can also share your prosperity type with others by taking a leadership role as a volunteer, right? Bringing beauty to the world, like we have someone painting those murals out there.
Yeah.
Is she doing that as a volunteer at work?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's charity. That's Shri. She's giving Shri in charity. So all of these prosperity types can be done on a volunteer basis as part of charity. Charity, as I said, we'll touch on that briefly. I don't have that slide in this show. I have another show, so I can't just jump to it. But we'll touch on that briefly in our very last session this afternoon. That charity is not just money, it's also sharing your types of prosperity. Yes?
So the definition of Aishwarya prosperity, you have mentioned over there money. So,
well, money is useful in control, in terms of control. Because Aishwarya has to do with being a controller. So it may also be dealing with various types of money. You know, it's kind of hard to be an administrative managerial leader if you're not also dealing with money.
okay, so it's not about earning money, it's more
No.
about controlling money.
Correct, correct. Excellent, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. You are the first person, I've been teaching this all over the world. This is my penultimate stop, and you're the first person who has clarified that. So, thank you. Yes?
So then how do we differentiate between strength and power and money? Virya and Aishwarya.
Strength is more your physical strength. Health. Like I was saying, my daughter is a teacher of classical Indian dance, of Bharatanatyam dance. So her work literally makes her healthier. She doesn't need, like, my work doesn't. My work is sedentary. I mean, I don't count standing up to walk over to the whiteboard as exercise. So I get my exercise as recreation, and I actually like that. I don't like jobs that are very physical. Because my work is so intensely mental and intellectual, when I need to relax, I need to do something physical. I have to do something that's not mental. You follow? So, you know, when I want to relax, I'll go take a walk. I mean, it's so nice here. I can walk by the sea. Woo. One of the things I love about visiting Melbourne. Yes? And I have to do that. I have to add some sort of exercise routine to my life because it's not integrated in my work, but I want to do that. Whereas my daughter doesn't have to. She has exercise as part of her work, and that's one of the things that she enjoys about it. It's one of the things that makes her work feel enriching to her. If I have it, it's part of my work, I find it annoying. Is that clear? Yes?
Can the prosperity type order change over a period of time?
Maybe slightly, but not dramatically. You know, maybe what's in the third and fourth place might switch at some point. Like I practically got a tie in third and fourth place. I can't really decide which one is more important to me. You know, I know Gyan's at the top for me, and after that is Shri, and then I've got a tie between Vairagya and Aishwarya. I can't figure out which one is more important. I mean, I know when I've had jobs, like when I was a school principal, definitely Aishwarya was much more dominant. I had to have a set schedule. I had to be there every day. You know, I had very short vacations. I had to have a lot of stuff. When you have a school, you have a lot of stuff everywhere. I mean, I had a little bit of Vairagya because we lived in the school, and so I could just move aside the desk and lie on the floor and sleep. You know, and right now for me it's kind of reversed. My work has much more Vairagya than Aishwarya. But I have to have at least some of both of them. But which one is dominant has shifted. But if I don't have Gyan and Shri, I'm suffocating. I can't even breathe.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Are these prosperities more aligned to the professional side of individuals, or they play a
Yes.
role as a person as well? Because a lot of
Well,
times-
both. Both. I mean, we're looking in this at our professional side. So it's about career Dharma. It's about our professional life, what we're doing to earn a livelihood. But the whole idea in the Shastra is that our natural personality, our natural temperament type should be the way that we earn. There should be a mesh between our qualities and our work. We should do work that fits our qualities. So who I am in this life, for whatever reasons, people ask me, where does it come from? I don't know. Probably comes from our past lives and our association with the modes and something about our upbringing and maybe some desire of the Lord, some mission we have in life or some combination of those. I don't know. And probably for each one of us, it's a little different mix of those things. But there's certain types of work that just fit us. And that's how we're supposed to maintain ourselves. The way we're supposed to maintain ourselves is by doing, again, looking at the body. The way that the cells in my heart maintain themselves is by doing their work as a heart muscle. If you could have a heart muscle cell that like migrates to the esophagus, it wouldn't be able to, not only would it really mess up my body, but it wouldn't be able to maintain itself properly. Any other questions about prosperity types? Yes.
Might be similar to the previous question, but if we had to decide a career for ourselves out of using the 6 prosperities, would it be based on more skill sets or?
Very good question. So she was asking as to how much is things based on our skill set. So something which I'll repeat several times today is that work involves 3 kinds of expertise. One has to become expert in the knowledge or the information required to do a particular work. One has to become expert in the skills. Even what we call unskilled labor involves some degree of skill. And then one should become expert in the Dharma, or the values, the ethics, the essence of that work. So there are hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of places you can go in the world to learn information and skills. But as far as I know, it's only in the Vedic wisdom literature, only in the Shastras, that you're going to find information about the Dharma. And what I'm focusing on today is the Dharma. Now, it is possible, and we're going to look at this in depth this afternoon, to do work that's not your Dharma, but for which you have a good skill set. You can become expert in the information and skills of something that's not your Dharma. However, because it's not your Dharma, you're going to mess it up dharmically. You cannot become expert in someone else's Dharma. That you just can't. Just can't do it. You can become expert in someone else's information and skills, but not their Dharma. Now, if someone says, well, what skills do you have? If you haven't understood your Dharma, you may never have been trained in the information and skills that match your Dharma. You may have been trained in someone else's information and skills. Or, and we'll talk about this more later, you might even think that your basic nature is a problem. You might think it's something to get rid of, so you might not even have any concept that you have any skills in it. So you might have a skill set in something that's not your Dharma. I mean, I was talking to one woman who told me in Hungary, she told me her parents were business people, she was trained in business, and when she got to be 20, she said, I want to be a law professor. So, you may be thoroughly trained in a skill set that's not who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you may not have any training in that skill set. You may be displaying your Dharma in a way that seems actually irritating to other people. So if you just ask people, what are you good at? You're not necessarily going to hit that. They may not know. Or they may be good at things that are not themselves. And if you ask people, what do you love doing? They may give you something that's recreation. And Krishna distinguishes in the Bhagavad Gita between work and recreation. He said the yogi is temperate in eating, sleeping, working, recreation. We do recreation because we love it. But that doesn't mean that you want to do it as your livelihood. It's not the way you want to contribute to society. It's not how you want to maintain yourself. You may like in the evenings to work in your garden and grow some flowers. But if someone says, well, do you want to start a landscaping business? You might go, well, not really. But if someone says, what do you love? Oh, I love putzing about in the garden. You understand? Or some people, they'll say, I love playing computer games. If you ask somebody, what do you love that you could just do all day? Oh, I love playing computer games all day. and say, well, would you like to do that as your contribution to society? Yeah, that's not really going to work. So these two questions, you know, what are you good at and what do you love, doesn't really get to the essence of what is your Dharma.
Should our Dharma is it just different for everybody?
Well, that's what we're working on today. And hopefully you'll have that answer by the end of the day today. Now we're going to look at another way of understanding our nature. So this is still in the first main area of identifying my prosperity type and career field. So this is still, we're in principle 1 still, connecting our nature with our livelihood. Now, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says there are 4 fields of work that he has created. And he says that the essence of these is guna and karma. Guna means qualities, karma means activities. That there should be a match between your qualities and your work. And I've had people say to me, well, can't you have one temperament but do others' work? And I'm like, well, no, that's kind of the whole point, that your work should match your temperament. Now, I would imagine that most, if not all of you here, are already familiar with this verse, and that you're also already familiar with the 4 Sanskrit terms that describe these 4 fields. I would like you to forget that you know those Sanskrit words. Just forget it, okay? We're going to be introducing English words for them, and I'd like you at least for 1 week to just forget you know the Sanskrit words. Why? Because we have a lot of misconceptions and prejudices and hierarchical ideas that are attached to those words that will cloud our thinking. So my co-author, Dr. Ruchira Datta, aka Rukmini Devi Dasi, she and I, when we were working on this, we very intentionally, although we use Sanskrit words for the prosperity types and for the gunas, we very intentionally did not use Sanskrit types for these 4 main areas of work. We wrote the book in language for the general public. But even for those of us who are already familiar, it's good to kind of take a step back and get a fresh view. So Krishna has divided all of the hundreds of thousands of careers into 4 areas. So Rukmini and I were asking, when we first embarked on this journey about 7 years ago, we were asking, why? Why did he do this? Why not just say, as we had that verse in the beginning, that everyone can become perfect by doing their own work? Whatever you're doing, use that and become perfect. You know, the rest of the principles of career dharma, like we talked about charity and others, why not just do those? Whatever you're doing. Why put some name on it? Why categorize it? So these are the 4 English terms that Rukmini and I came up with. They're probably not perfect. I've had some people argue very intensely with me over some of these. But we're trying to encapsulate the essence of both the work and the temperament of each field. So we're calling them artistry, ideas, resources, and government. So why did Krishna do this? Well, one reason is that these 4 types of work always exist in human society. And if you know what your field is, you can always find some work in your field because each field is very broad. Each field encompasses a very large number of careers. But specific careers come and go in human society. There were no software engineers 200 years ago. There are still some blacksmiths and glassblowers, but not a whole lot. And in a particular area, the availability of certain careers waxes and wanes as well. But one can always find some kind of work within one's field. But the bigger issue is that the dharma of these fields are different. Each field has its own dharma, which is different from that of the others and mutually exclusive. Now, no matter how many times I say this, I always find people who don't believe me. You can't be in 2 fields. You cannot be in 2 fields. You cannot be in 2 fields. And it doesn't matter how many times I say it. Somebody will come up to me afterwards and said, but can't you be in 2 fields? The reason you can't be in 2 fields is that the dharma is mutually exclusive. You would be at war with yourself, or you wouldn't be able to function. It's like if you had half of you trying to go in one direction while half of you tried to go into another direction. And you just wouldn't be able to move forward at all. The Dharma of these fields, as I say, they're mutually exclusive, and often they're opposite to each other, because they fulfill different roles in society. And therefore they have very different temperaments. Now what you can be is you can be in one field that particularly assists another field. You might be firmly in ideas, but you especially help the field of government. You might be in resources, but you're especially helping ideas. You might be in artistry, especially helping ideas. I was just having a conversation with my daughter this morning about how she works in the field of ideas and how she has an assistant who's in the field of artistry. And she said, yes, she's definitely not in ideas, although she's assisting me in my work. So that's very, very common. And when people think they're in more than one field, there's two choices. Either they're confused, which is the case for a large number of people in 2024. So if you're confused, you are in very good company. So either you're confused, or you're in one field that particularly assists another field. Sometimes the confusion comes about because people are confusing the fields with the prosperity types. So you can have any combination of prosperity type in any field. So you can have a career that gives you Aishvarya in any of these four fields. You can have a career that gives you Gyan in any of these four fields. So that's one source of confusion. That some people think, well, if I have a career that's really giving me Gyan, then I've got to be in this particular field. And the answer is no. So I see that those are the sources of confusion. So a number of times the fields have things that superficially appear similar to something in another field. And this also is a source of confusion. What we're going to do right now is go through the nature or the definition of the fields. That's all we're going to do in our remaining time this morning, is we're going to define the fields. This afternoon, we're going to define the nature of the people in the fields. So to see where you fit, we'll be doing that this afternoon at 2:30, and we will start, Krishna willing, at 2:30. I think in the Hare Krishna movement, everyone has been well trained that the first 20 minutes, nothing happens. Okay? But we will start, Krishna willing, promptly at 2:30. And then we'll really look at what is our temperament. What is the temperament of people in the field? So we will not be looking at that much right now. What we've just covered previously with the prosperity types was chapter 2. What we're going to be covering right now is chapter 3. This afternoon we'll be covering chapters 4, 5, and 6. Now as we go through these, I'm going to be asking you about what careers do you think are in that field? And then we're going to talk just briefly about how do people see each of these fields in a negative way. Because the Dharma of the fields are mutually exclusive, people outside of that field may tend to see that field negatively because it has a Dharma that's very different to their own. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Okay. Okay, we're going to, yes?
Only one question is, in that field that you mentioned, if someone is doing a small business or video business, don't you think that, okay, they might need to cross over on those fields?
That's a very good question. And we're jumping a little here because I would have to use terminology that I haven't yet explained. So what I'd like you to do as a favor for me is, can you hold that question for my first class this afternoon when we talk about the nature of the people in the fields? And if I forget, which I might, if you could again ask that question. All right? That's an excellent, excellent and important question. Thank you. I don't want to lose it. But if I try to answer it now, I think I'll confuse you all. All right. Okay, so let's look at the field of artistry. So what is the nature of this field? Artistry provides all of the pleasures in human society. Without artistry, society would be dull and bland. On a metaphorical basis, as an analogy, artistry is supplying all the salt and the spices in the food of life. Without the work of this field, our life would be just like plain rice. No curry sauce, no dal, no sabji on it, right? It would feel like we were just eating solidified air in life. So they're the ones who are providing all of the pleasures. This field also provides all of the functionality of society. Because of this field, things work. Because of the people in this field, I have a computer that works. I have electricity that works. I have a projector that works. I have a room that's clean. So everything that works, everything that's supportive. And they're providing the beauty of society. Again, the pleasures, the aesthetics of society. So in the universal body, this field is the legs. Now, it's very interesting that in Bhagavatam 2:10-25, it is stated that God himself directly supervises this field. Why is that? Because without the work in this field, nothing else can go on. Just like if you don't have legs, you can live without legs, but you tend to have to get some kind of substitute for them. You've got to have a prosthetic or a wheelchair or something. Otherwise, you can't really function. You can't do anything else without them. And it is stated that the people in this field especially have the protection of the Lord's feet. So not only they're at the feet of the universal body, the universal form of the Lord, and they're particularly under the shelter of his feet. On a subtle level, this field represents the Muladhara chakra, which is the chakra of function, stability, and the Swadhisthana chakra, the chakra of pleasure. Some idea of what careers might be in this field. And again, wrong answers are just as much of a learning experience as right answers. This is not an exam, it's a learning experience. So any idea of what careers might be in this field?
Chefs.
Chefs, yes, very good.
Construction workers.
Construction workers, yes.
Artists.
Most artists, not all, but most artists, yes.
Technology?
Yes, technologists, yes. Now, not the people who are doing the research to develop technology, but the people who are applying that research in a practical way.
Any kind of sports?
Yes, all professional athletes. Excuse me?
Doctors?
Doctors, generally not. I mean, some forms of medicine, like a dentist would be. And generally, it's considered that surgeons would be. But generally not doctors. Designers, yes. Electricians, yes.
Sculptures.
Sculptors, most. The vast majority of sculptors, but not all.
Musicians?
The vast majority of musicians, but not all.
Painters.
Huh?
Painters.
Like house painters?
Yeah.
Yes.
Choreographers.
Hmm? Choreographers, yes. Carpenters, yes.
Farm workers.
Farm workers, yes, not the farm owner. But if you're coming on the farm to pick apples, then yes. Comedians, most, but not all.
Labor jobs.
Huh?
Labor jobs.
Can you be specific?
As in cleaning or
Cleaning, okay, so people who are cleaning homes, offices, yes.
Actors?
Most actors, not all.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
What are the ones that don't fit into those?
Oh, we will get there, don't worry.
No, in terms of, say you said all musicians.
Yeah, oh, I knew exactly what you were asking. Yes, we'll get there.
government?
No.
Masseuse?
Huh?
Masseuse?
Yes.
Journalists?
Journalists, some journalists. So if you're writing the gossip column, yes. If you're a war correspondent in Ukraine, no. Poets, some. If you're writing poetry just to bring beauty and pleasure to people, yes. Huh? No. Now, there are some people in the field of artistry who do some teaching. So you might have someone who's a carpenter and they also teach some classes in carpentry. But if you're a full-time teacher as your profession, then no. If you make a video about how to ice a cake and you're teaching people like that, yes. But if you're actually a teacher, then no.
Architect?
Architect, yes.
Driver?
Driver, yes. So if you're a taxi driver, if you're a bus driver, if you're an airplane driver, big bus that flies in the sky. Engineers, yes, all engineers.
Astronauts.
Now it's interesting, what do astronauts do?
Engineering on the spacecraft.
If they're engineers, then yes. Now, if they're scientists going up there to do scientific research, then no. So if they're pilots, yes. If they're engineers, yes. If they're research scientists, no. Okay, what are some negative feelings or things people say or think about the work in this field?
They can't do labor work. I think they can't.
They're seeing it as kind of low-class labor work, right? Which I find fascinating because without this work we couldn't survive and we wouldn't have a nice life. You know, it's not really very fair to see the people who pick up your trash or pave your roads as doing low-class work. You know, if your roads are bumpy or your trash doesn't get picked up, then all the pleasures in life disappear. But we have this tendency to see like that. Yes, what else?
Almost all of them have the profession of source supervisor.
Yes. So there are some people who don't, and we'll talk about the temperament of the people in this field this afternoon. The temperament of the people have to do with pleasing a client or a customer. So because the natural temperament of the people in this field is a service attitude to please a client or a customer, we may see that as a criticism, or you're not so independent. Right? Even those who don't have a direct boss, like he was asking about some little business, they don't have a direct boss, they're still trying to please customers and clients, and people may see that as a downside.
People judging it to be either very hard or very easy work.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before. So people judging it to be very hard work, like, okay, it's going to be a lot of hard labor of some sort, even to be like a dancer or an athlete, right? It's going to be very hard work. Or they'll say, oh, it's very easy work, anybody can do it. Isn't that interesting? Now, of course, some of the jobs in this field require tremendous amounts of education and training. You're not going to be an aeronautics engineer. That's not an easy job. But yeah, the people tend to see it, oh, that's just a lot of hard work, or it's extremely easy work. Okay, any questions about the nature of the field of artistry? Again, we'll talk about the temperament of the people this afternoon. So any question about what the field of artistry is? Yes?
I thought engineers might come under ideas.
A lot of people think that, because a lot of people think engineers are scientists. But engineers take scientific knowledge and apply it for functionality and pleasure in society. So that's a very, very common misconception. And it's well, I don't know if I'll say this, but if you read in our book the biography of my co-author, you can find something about that, I'll just say. Any other questions about the nature of the field of artistry? Okay, let's go on to the field of government. So as soon as human society is anything more than a very simple structure, you need some kind of organization. You need somebody to make laws, you need somebody to enforce laws, right? You need somebody to protect people from internal and external threats. You have to make sure there's social justice, that there's proper distribution of resources for social justice. You have to make sure that there's services that individuals cannot provide on their own, like roads and schools and hospitals and parks. You know, it's not that each of us are going to go out and pave our own part of the road. Now, government is responsible for the interests of everyone in their domain, unlike, say, a business that's just responsible for their particular employees or their particular area. Now, this is the second most abstract field. Artistry is a very concrete field. Like in artistry, a table, this is this kind of wobbly table, but it's a table, a little wobbly. You know, what is a table? It's a very concrete kind of thing. Is it a table? Is it not a table? Are you a good carpenter? You're not a good carpenter. To define what is a good government and what is good governance is a lot harder. What exactly constitutes government? What is its work? How do we know that it's doing a good job? Is much more abstract to define. Now, when we talk about the field of government, we're not only talking about political states. Organizations that do government type work like NATO, Interpol, the United Nations would also be in the field of government. Now, traditionally in the Shastra, people in the field of government got their income either from rent as landlords, because their apartment complex is like a little kingdom, right? You're collecting rent and you're providing parking space and water and electricity and making sure people are cared for, or from taxes and fees and fines and things like that. And people in government did not sustain themselves through charity. However, at the present time, there are charitable organizations that do government work. And we call them, interestingly enough, non-governmental organizations. So it's not that every charity is in the field of government, but there are charities that do government type work. My assumption is that they're finding gaps in what political governments are doing. So there's stuff that the political governments should be doing, but they're not. And so some NGO will go to a place and take care of sewage and roads, right? Like I spend time in Vrindavan and I've worked with a number of such organizations where they do the kind of work that the government should be doing but isn't. Making sure that people get access to medical care, making sure that people get access to education, making sure that people get access to food, making sure there's proper roadways, making sure there's parks and there's trees and garbage is getting picked up and things of that nature. So that would also be in the field of government. Now, a very important point is that this field provides the leadership for society as a whole. These are the people leading society in a practical manner. However, there are leaders in all four fields. So one common mistake that people make is they think, if I'm a leader, that means I'm in the field of government. Wrong. You can be a leader in artistry. If you have Aishvarya as one of your prosperity types, or Shri in terms of charismatic leadership, are there charismatic leaders in artistry, for example? Yeah? Are there like musicians and athletes who are charismatic leaders? Yes. That doesn't push them into the field of government. You understand? Yeah. And there are even administrative managers in the field of artistry. So I met one devotee in Dubai. He said to me, I'm a project manager. I said, what kind of projects do you manage? He said, well, when a business gets a new building, or if they're renovating, I get a team of electricians, a team of carpenters, a team of plumbers, a team of interior designers, and a couple others as well. He said, and I manage the team leaders of those teams. I coordinate everything. I work out the budgets and organize the whole project. And I said, are you doing this to please your client or customer? He said, oh, absolutely. That is a leader in artistry. Sure? Yes? So there are all four fields have leaders in those fields. And just because you're a leader, either charismatically or administratively, does not put you in government. But government provides the leadership for society as a whole. So every job in government is working in some capacity leading society. And the universal body, these are the arms. Now, in English, the word arms also means weapons. Right? If you're an arms dealer, you're not selling body parts. Right? Are you armed doesn't mean, do you have all your limbs? So sometimes people think that this field, everybody's walking around with some kind of weapon. But arms are also used for care. And this field is the arms of the universal body in terms of care. They are basically like the big parents of society. They are providing all of the care. Just like parents in a home, they make sure that there's justice between their children are treated fairly, they make the rules, they enforce the rules, they protect the family, they make sure that there's everything that everybody needs. So government, you're doing this on a big scale. It's kind of a big field. And it deals with the heart. So on a subtle level, it's the heart chakra. It's the anahata chakra, that of caring. So any idea what careers might be in this field?
Judge.
Judges, yes.
Would lawyers come?
Lawyers, yes.
Soldiers.
Soldiers, anyone in the military, not the chefs. The chefs are in artistry, but anyone else who's in the military, yes. Any branch of the military.
People in the health field? Like in the health field?
In the health field, not usually. So you have, we were saying, some people in the health field are in artistry. Others are in ideas. Now, there are people in government who manage health in the society. This is what I was saying about one field that assists another field. So you may have people who work in government who regulate health. Or they make sure that everyone in their domain has access to health. They may establish government hospitals or government clinics and make sure that people who are poor have proper access to health. They may have laws dealing with health. So they have laws dealing with pharmaceuticals, and they have laws dealing with licensing of doctors and licensing of medical facilities. So that is all within the realm of government. Yes?
Are all lawyers in the government?
The work of being a lawyer is in the field of government. Now, I'm sure there are lawyers who don't have the right temperament and they're in the wrong field. So when you say, are all lawyers, I'm like, well, there might be a lawyer who actually has the mentality of artistry and is doing government work wrongly. We'll talk about that in our second class this afternoon. But the work of being a lawyer, that work itself, the container, so to speak, that is in government.
Transport and logistics.
Transport and logistics. Yeah, not the drivers, again, not the train engineers, but those people who are regulating that.
MPs and ministers?
Yes, MPs and ministers, excellent.
Treasurers. Treasurers.
The treasurers of the government, yes. If you're working in the Ministry of Finance for the government, yes. Now, if you're just doing the accounting, then you're in artistry.
Ambassadors?
Ambassadors, definitely, yes.
Would NGOs come into this?
Well, the NGOs, the work of NGOs is in the field of government. Now, you definitely have some people who work in NGOs who are themselves in the field of artistry assisting the government. But the people who are actually managing and leading the NGOs, they're in the field of government, yes. If they're doing government type work. We usually call that an NGO. Because, like, there are nonprofits that have nothing to do with government. There are nonprofits that support the arts or support education and are not doing government work.
Aged cares and childcare.
Aged care and childcare. Well, the people who are actually doing that are in artistry. And we're not talking about teachers of children, but if you're doing like just a daycare center, or aged care, that's in artistry. If you're regulating that, you're in government. So if you're working on what are the rules for aged care and child care, you're making sure that the aged care and child care facilities are in compliance with the law. Or you're maybe even constructing some that belong to the government. So there might be some that are privately run, but the government may establish a child care center or may establish an aged care center that they then run to provide that for the community. That would be in government.
Customs and border security.
Customs and border security, yes.
Civil engineers.
Civil engineers, no, all engineers are in artistry. Although they may be assisting government. So if the government wants to, they need to build a new bridge, they're going to employ civil engineers. So those are people in artistry who are assisting government, who may be employed by people in the field of government.
Embassy officers?
Yes, the officers in an embassy, the diplomats, not the secretaries, not the receptionists.
Police.
Police officers, yes. Now, the career in my mind that really epitomizes this field is a firefighter, if you want to get kind of like the picture of the field of government. Also, other people in politics, so you've got, your MPs, your prime minister, your presidents, mayors, governors, I'm not sure what you call them here in Australia. Legislators, you have a parliament, right?
Yeah.
So you're members of parliament. That kind of work is all in the field of government.
Why would firefighters be in artistry field since they're providing a functional?
They're providing mostly protection. And the temperament is actually opposite.
How about trustees of the temple?
Trustees of a temple.
Or different organizations, trustees.
Well, if you have just a temple, if a temple's just a temple, so if a temple is just worship and education, if that's all it is, then that's in the field of ideas. If you have a temple where you're running a community, like say New Govardhan Farm is an example, it's a whole community. The running of that community is in the field of government. Those who actually are managing that community, that work is in the field of government. But if your temple is just worship and education, and you've got a few renunciates living there, so that's not in the field of government.
Paramedics coming? Paramedics will come?
Paramedics, yes, I'm pretty sure. That's something that I've thought about back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What is that job? But I'm pretty sure paramedics, that they're close enough to firefighters in what they're doing, and a little separate from like healthcare in general. What are the types of criticisms that people may have about this field and the work in this field? It's always interesting because government and resources are both fields of expansion. And so people tend to see the expansive field as more likely to be corrupted than the two satisfied fields. However, corruption is possible in any field. Anybody can be corrupt. You can have a corrupt worker in artistry who puts too much sand in the concrete mix, So you can have corruption anywhere. And people who are naturally have the temperament of government, if a person has the temperament of government and is working in the field of government, they're not very likely to be corrupted. The people who are likely to be corrupted in the field of government are people with temperaments of the other fields.
Dictators and controllers? Dictators?
Excellent, that's what I was looking for. So the main criticism of the field of government is that they're a bunch of dictatorial controllers. And that's because that's the job of the field of government, is to be a controller. They're supposed to be controlling the society. That's their job. But we'll often look at them and say, oh, you're just a big controller. When that's what they're supposed to be doing. Any questions about the nature of the field of government? Yes?
Just one clarification. So if you are working as an engineer in a regulatory body, so what do you classify that?
In what kind of?
In a regulatory function.
You're working as an engineer in a regulatory function. What exactly are you doing?
For example, you work as an engineer for APRA, which is a health regulator. So the company is in government,
Okay.
but you're working as an engineer, so how do you classify that?
Well, without telling me any more details, it sounds like that work is in the field of artistry assisting the field of government. And no, I need to know some more specificity about what happens in the job. Just like there are people called social workers who are government workers. And if you are a social worker, if you're doing social work, generally what that means is you're administering the law. You're making sure that, children who are neglected or abused are being taken care of, that people are getting government assistance, right? You're making sure that the law is there to take care of people. But at least in the United States, you can get a degree in social work and then work as a therapist. So you can do the work of a psychologist with a degree in social work, which is then in another field. So when someone says a social worker, that would have to refer to people who are actually doing social work. So sometimes there's a name put on something, but the actual specifics of the job are different. Do you follow what I'm saying? So if you just give me a title, sometimes I can't, if I don't know exactly what is involved in the work. So like when I'm doing, one-on-one consultations, I'll often ask people, so what exactly are you doing? What does your work entail? You can't always tell from the title. Any other questions about the field of government?
Is it always rules-based
Is it always rules-based?
government?
Well, I think it's interesting you bring this up because really those with Dharmic expertise in the field of government are much more principles-based. Because again, it's the second most abstract field. And in fact, those who really have Dharmic expertise know how to apply the rules according to principles. They're not just applying rules as rules. That's much more of a concrete understanding. That's more of what goes on in artistry. Okay, if I'm going to build a table, I have to follow these rules, or the table's going to fall apart. It's much more of a concrete understanding. That's why you have like a judge. Why is there a judge in a courtroom? The judge doesn't just keep order. You can have the bailiff do that. The judge has to understand the subtleties of the law and the principles of the law to be able to apply the law to the various situations that come up in the courtroom. What are they going to allow? What are they not going to allow? Often the judge has leeway as to how they sentence somebody. They're applying intelligence on the basis of abstraction and principles. It's not, otherwise you could just have a computer, but it's not simply an algorithm and just rules. Excellent question. Yes?
Would urban planning and land management be under artistry or?
Government. Also, excellent question.
Just another clarification of psychologists, what field?
We'll get there. Okay, let's go on now to the field of resources. So, this is a field that provides the resources. This is the only field that actually, you could say, creates wealth. Now, of course, someone in this field in Brisbane said to me, well, I'm not really creating wealth. All wealth comes from nature. I said, well, okay, fine. But you're translating natural resources into wealth. The other fields do not do this. The other fields manipulate the resources, move them around, redistribute them, change them, but they're not actually generating them. This is the only field that provides the raw materials for food, construction, clothing, medicines. It all comes from this field. Now, in terms of abstraction, this is between artistry and government. So The field of resources is more abstract than artistry, but less abstract than government. For example, what makes a good business? And how should you run a business? Is going to be answered very differently by different cultures. Right? If you're in Denmark, they're going to say it should be run by consensus. If you then go to Japan, they're going to say it should be run by executive fiat. Right? If you were running a business in Denmark and you move to Japan and you try to run it by consensus, they'll tell you, what's wrong with you? You're a weak leader. Right? And if you're running a business in Japan and you go to Denmark and you try to run it by executive decisions, they're going to say, what are you, a big bully? Huh? So how to run a business properly, what's a successful business, who's a successful business person, is more abstract than who's a good carpenter. But it's not as abstract as what is a good government. Now, this field provides the primary employment in society. Now, the other three fields do also employ people. There are people in artistry who employ people. Government definitely employs people. Ideas employs people. But your primary employer is resources. So resources is creating wealth not just for the customers they serve, but also for their employees. So kind of in both directions, they're creating the main wealth for society. Because of this, they are providing the main tax base for the government. So the bulk of the money in taxes is coming from those who work in resources. They are also giving the bulk of the charity. Now, everyone is supposed to be charitable. That's principle 3 of career Dharma. Everyone is supposed to give in charity. But the main quantity of charity is going to come from people in the field of resources because they're controlling the majority of society's wealth. In the universal body, they are the stomach. Now, Srila Prabhupada often compares, metaphorically, the stomach in the body to God. You know how he'll say, you have to water the root of a tree, or you have to put food in the stomach. If you want to nourish the whole body, you have to put food in the stomach. If the stomach is not healthy and the stomach is not getting proper food, the body itself will wither. This is the field that's providing, again, all the nourishment to society. And on a subtle level, this would be the Manipuri chakra. Okay. What careers might be in this field? Farmers, yes. Not the person who comes to pick the berries, but the person who owns and runs the farm, yes. Yes? Artists, most artists are in the field of artistry. The vast majority of artists are in the field of artistry, and a few not. We haven't gotten to their field yet, but no. Artists would not be in resources.
People who own manufacturing plants?
The people who own and run and manage the manufacturing plants, yes.
Pharmaceuticals.
People who own pharmaceutical business, yes.
Landlords.
Huh? What?
Landlords.
Landlords. No, we said landlords are in what field? Anybody remember? Government. Landlords are in government. The buildings that they own are like little kingdoms. They're maybe very little kingdoms. And instead of collecting taxes, they're collecting rent. But the landlords take care of their tenants the way a government takes care of its citizens.
Miners?
Miners? The people who work in the mine would be in artistry. The people who own the mine and manage the mine are in resources. Yes, people who run a bank, yes. And the same with, now not the tellers. The tellers who are counting the money are in artistry. However, you know when you go in a bank, there's tables you can sit at? Yeah. And somebody will help you with your accounts and this. Those people are also in resources.
Stock market?
Stockbrokers, yes.
How about insurances?
Yes.
Entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Real estate agents?
Yes.
Recruiters.
Recruiters, yes.
Internet and mobile service provider.
Yes, if they're running the company, yes. What are the criticisms that people make about this field?
Money-minded.
Money-minded, which is, of course, their job. And yes, you're too money-minded. Well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, minding the money. But yes, that why are you so money-minded? Yes. What are other criticisms people make about this? Yes?
It gives a feeling that you're not doing too much, but still you're getting something as a...
That you're getting out of proportion, that you're unfairly profiting. Yes, yes. And of course, that's a misunderstanding, which we'll get into this afternoon, of the nature of this field of providing sustainable regenerative wealth. That in order to provide sustainable regenerative wealth, the people in this field need to have profit coming in. They need to have this cushion of profit that doesn't have to be there in the other fields. And people may see that as unfair or selfish. Yes. What other criticism of this field?
They're generally seen as, even controlling the government. These are the wealthiest people in the world.
Well, this field should not be controlling the government.
No,
That is a problem.
No, but they are generally criticized that because they are wealthy, you talk about...
Yes. Well, because they do provide the majority of the taxes. If the people in the field of government are weak or adharmic, they can then be manipulated by people in the field of resources, which is very bad for society in general. Therefore, you need people in each field. You need people to be not only in the right field, but you need people to be in the right field rightly. If I'm living in your house, not as a guest, but if I've taken over your house, that's adharmic. But if I'm in my house and I'm leaving a mess everywhere, I don't fix the plumbing, I leave trash everywhere, that's also adharmic. So we have the two main problems we have today are people in the wrong field and people in the right field wrongly. They have the beginning, and we'll discuss this afternoon, they have the beginning temperament for that field, but they don't know how to act in that field in a dharmic way. So most people's main interest in career dharma is, where do I belong? What's my field? But after you answer that question, it's okay, now that you know where you belong, how to be there properly. Any other criticisms of the field of resources?
Tax evasion.
Tax, well, that's cheating. Now, anybody in any field can be a cheater. And someone mentioned corruption with government. We tend to see cheating more prominently, or we tend to assume cheating more in the fields of government and resources, which are both fields of expansion and diplomacy. So we have a tendency to see this expansive diplomatic mood as being more susceptible to corruption. But actually it isn't. One can be corrupt in any of the four fields. So you can have ethical people in any four fields, and you can have corruption in any four fields. I think what you were talking about, people often call that as greed. You're taking more than you're due. And it's because people, of course, some people in the field of resources are actually corrupt. But the dharma of the field of resources is you have to actually take enough for yourself that you can have a sustainable, regenerative concern in order to serve the society. Any questions about the field of resources? Yes?
If you're in the field of artistry, like say for example you own a business in engineering and you're the owner of it, would that be...
You own an engineering business. So the owner of the business is in resources, the engineers that work for them are in artistry. Now we can get to, I'd rather kind of get to it this afternoon, but I can just mention briefly. Like let's say that, you bake beautiful cakes and so you have a little bakery business. Now you're not trying to provide wealth for society. You're really just trying to provide pleasure and beauty for society. You don't want to expand into like bakeries all over the place. So that's, although it's a business, it's an artistry. The example that I like to give is from where I stay. I have a house in Govardhan in India. So in the town, there's this one man who fixes flip-flops. Is that what you call them here? Thongs, flip-flops, slippers? Thongs, okay. Those little like plastic or rubber things, you know. So he fixes them. And his shop consists of a piece of cardboard and a little toolbox. So he definitely has a lot of vairagya in his work, by the way. He sets his own hours, right? He sets his own rates like that. I don't know what he does in the rainy season to make money, because he's just out in the open air. But he's in what field? Artistry. Even though you can say, well, he has a little business. Okay, just a couple blocks away, there's some people who have some street carts, street vendors. And they have stuff from all over India. They may even have some stuff from Malaysia or Thailand. And they're really aware of like, okay, this time of year, it's mostly locals. This time of year, we get visitors from India. This time of year, we get a lot of foreign visitors. And what are the trends going on in society? People are buying this kind of thing. They're not buying this kind of thing. Where can I get the best price? And they're not making any of the things that they sell. They're sourcing it from someplace else, and they're looking at trends in the market, even though they just have a little cart. What field are they in? Resources. Does that clarify things? A little bit, we'll discuss that more in a second.
What about Donald Trump?
Can we not? You know what I'd really like regarding him? That if the media just refused to cover anything about him. I really think that would be really great.
But which field would you
They're driven by revenue. I'm not sure. I think he's a very corrupt person in the field of resources, but I'm not even sure about that because he's been a terrible business person. He hasn't actually made money. He inherited a lot of money, but he hasn't actually made money. He hasn't actually generated wealth. He's just working on inheritance. So he really hasn't shown any expertise anywhere. Sorry about him. I mean, he's done some good things. What do they say? A broken clock is right twice a day. So, he's a real embarrassment to me as an American. Like a real embarrassment. It's like, oh my God. Actually, I was in Durban, South Africa, and I woke up and I was staying at the temple, and the toilet tank had flooded. Not the toilet itself was clean water, but it was from the toilet tank, and so there was like this much water in a large part of the place where I was staying. So I'm working on cleaning that up and getting that fixed. And then I turn on my phone and I see 2 bits of news. And I was going right from there to India. I saw that Donald Trump had just been elected president and that Modi had demonetized the rupees, which I had. I had like 20,000 rupees on me, you know, and I was going to go to India. So I had the place where I was living covered with water. Donald Trump was the president, and a bunch of worthless money in my wallet. That was a fun day, you know. And I went up to my altar and I said, "My dear Lord, you are my only shelter in this difficult world." Any other questions about the field of resources?
What about who handled the complaints?
About what?
Handling complaints, which can be...
Handling complaints? Like a customer service representative?
Yes.
Oh, the artist.
Where would like pirates fit under the full?
Pirates. So you're asking about criminals?
Yes.
Okay. So criminality is you have the temperament of the field, but you're doing it adharmically. Like the mafia is like an adharmic version of government. You follow? And a pirate would be an adharmic version of resources. So if you have the temperament of one of the fields, but you're using it for criminality, it's like like a parody almost of the field. Instead of using your natural tendency to better society, you're using your natural tendency to harm society. And you're using the same kind of talents and proclivities that you should be using for the good, you're using that for the bad. Therefore, we call it duskritina. Duskritina. Kriti. You have some merit, you have some ability, and you're using it to harm. Yes?
I have heard like some people do multiple jobs, like they are like project manager during the daytime, but in the evening they go for like a a different thing like going to polls and do the work there.
Going to where?
Polls or grocery supermarket.
What is that?
Grocery store.
A grocery store. And what do they do there?
Yeah, they just do the stock piling or something like that.
So they have one job in resources and one in artistry.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, so we're going to be looking this afternoon at how do you muck up your life in the world when you do work that's in the wrong field. And Krishna's really heavy about this. Again, right now we're defining the fields, not so much the temperament of the people in the field. We're saying what work is categorized in what field, and then we'll look at the temperaments this afternoon. So if you want to understand about your temperament, that'll be at 2:30. Sharp. It will be at 2:30. We will not waste the first 20 minutes of that time. Okay, let's go on to the field of ideas. So this is the field that provides all the wisdom and the guidance for society. All of the knowledge, all of the wisdom, training. Now, the vast majority of the intellectuals of the world are working in this field. But not everyone in this field is an intellectual. So just like if it's raining, there has to be clouds. But if there's clouds, is it necessarily raining? No. So if you're an intellectual, you are most likely suited for the field of ideas. However, if you're in the field of ideas, you may not at all be an intellectual. The vast majority of careers in the field of ideas are not intellectual careers. As far as intelligence, intelligence is everywhere. Are there highly intelligent musicians? Yes. Are there, again, if you're an aeronautics engineer, you're highly intelligent, I would assume, hopefully. You're certainly very well educated. Are there highly intelligent people in business? Definitely. Are there highly intelligent people in government? Yes, definitely. So intelligence is spread all over, and it's not that not everyone in the field of ideas is superior in intelligence to everyone else. That's just not true. And most of the careers in ideas are not intellectual careers. However, if you are an intellectual, you are most likely suited for the field of ideas. Just like we were talking about leadership in government. Government leads a society, but there are leaders in all four fields. So the field of ideas provides the intelligence for society. However, there are intelligent people in all four fields. Now, generally people in the field of ideas communicate wisdom and truth through language. Sometimes they may use mathematics, and sometimes they may use the arts. So a small portion of musicians, artists, sculptors, actors, dancers are actually in the field of ideas. Poets. If you're singing, "My baby left me and I'm so sad," that's in artistry. But if you're singing songs about philosophy and wisdom and truth, and the aesthetics part is secondary, then that's in ideas. Now, that's a small portion of people in the fine arts, but there are some. And the difference is subtle. The difference is subtle. As I was saying, my daughter is a Bharatanatyam dance teacher. She also is an academic teacher, and she is a teacher. And she uses teaching dance and dance itself as a means of communicating wisdom. But I've seen that most people involved in dance are not like that. What they're communicating is inspiring pleasure. And even if you have two dance troupes that are both having songs about Krishna, I've learned to see and to be able to figure out which ones of them are in artistry and which ones of them are in ideas. And the majority of them are in artistry. I mean, for example, many times when you see a Bharatanatyam performance, right at the beginning, they'll tell you what it's about. And they may tell you what mudra means what thing, and then you forget that once the dance starts, and you're thinking, what is that about anyway? And it's mostly just you're appreciating how beautiful it is. Now, it's inspiring beauty, it's uplifting beauty, it may be spiritually uplifting beauty, but that's what it's about. And one thing my daughter regularly does is she dubs over the music with English. I mean, if you know Tamil, that's another thing, then you're hearing it in your own language. But for those of us who aren't Tamil speaking, you know, or the various languages. Most of it's in Tamil or sometimes Telugu. So you actually understand what you're viewing. And it's much more like hearing a Bhagavatam class. It's like you're hearing a Bhagavatam class that's being done through dance. So that puts something in the field of ideas. Is that somewhat, yes? And again, this is subtle. If you're going to look at a particular person who's an artist or musician and deciding are they in ideas or artistry, it takes a little bit to discern it. I was dealing with one person I was doing a consultation with, and he said, I don't know if I'm in artistry or ideas. He says, I'm a web designer. He said, but I'm not just doing beauty and pleasure for the sake of beauty and pleasure. I'm doing it, I want to have meaning. And I said, you don't understand the field of artistry. I said, artistry, it's a dharma. You want the pleasures you're giving society to be meaningful and to be inspirational. You're not just doing pleasure for pleasure's sake. It's actually a dharma. I said, is your main interest in communicating wisdom or communicating functionality or beauty? That's inspirational. He said, I mostly want to communicate inspirational beauty. I said, well, that's artistry. So most of the time, people in the fine arts are in artistry, but there are a few exceptions. Ideas is considered the head of the universe and encompasses two parts of the subtle body, the chakras, the Visuddhachakra and the Agya chakra. Any ideas about careers in the field of ideas? Scientists, yes. Researchers, yes. Teachers, yes. Now again, if you just do a little teaching on the side, right, like in the Bhagavatam it says Arjuna taught Satyaki military arts, but Arjuna wasn't a teacher by profession. Yes, so if you teach some of your craft to somebody on the side, but we're talking about if you're a teacher by profession. Mathematicians, yes.
Would some music directors and composers come in?
Most composers are in artistry. And music directors would probably be leaders in the field of artistry in the vast majority of cases.
Linguists and grammarians.
What are they doing?
Like figuring out specific, like, linguist stuff.
I can't get a handle on that. What are they doing exactly? Are they proofreading?
Sometimes they're going back to like old texts and trying to figure out what was said.
So they're researchers. They're doing research, yes, if they're researchers.
Astrologers.
Astrologers, yes.
Philosophers.
Philosophers, yes. Priests, yes. Authors and writers, depends what they're writing. So if they're writing romance novels, detective novels, or even nonfiction, if they're writing the history with some big star, Tom Cruise, if they're writing the biography of Tom Cruise or Elizabeth Taylor, that's in artistry. If they're writing books on wisdom and philosophy, that's an idea. Same with journalists. Remember we said like the gossip columnists, the obit writers, that's in artistry. The war correspondents who are in the Ukraine, in Israel, who are giving us actual knowledge and information and guidance, that's in ideas.
Archaeologists. Archaeologists.
Archaeologists, you said?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, what is the main criticism of the field of ideas? Huh? Well, anyone can be an exploiter. Anyone in any of the four fields, but specific to the field of ideas. What are some of the criticisms people have of field of ideas?
Lazy.
Interesting. I think you're very close to it. I think you're within like one millimeter.
They are generally considered, not in right headspace.
Not in the right headspace.
Till the time that idea is exhibited, because sometimes that idea is quite revolutionary and people don't really accept.
Okay, so I think you're both kind of talking from a different angle about the same thing. That it's useless. You're not productive members of society. Yes? Is that what you meant by lazy?
I was trying to be respectful to say. People sometimes think they are mad, and till the time they prove themselves, right? They say mad scientists.
Mad scientists. Well, it's interesting. A mad scientist would be just like we were talking about, the mafia is a perversion of government, right? And a drug dealer is a perversion of resources. Your mad scientist is a perversion of ideas. So, some scientist who's cooking up something to blow up the world, that's a criminal version of ideas. But look at the ideas field itself. I think what this gentleman was saying about laziness, that people see a lot of the work of ideas as non-productive and useless. And there's a whole segment of the field of ideas that it's very hard to maintain yourself doing that kind of work. Because other people think, what are you doing this for? Why are you researching the eating habits of some bear in the, Siberia? Or even, if you go to most temples and you say, can you please give me a room and prasadam and everything I need, and I'm going to spend the next year looking at the difference between the poetry of Kavi Karnapur and Srila Rupa Goswami. Most temples will go, sorry, we don't have any space for that kind of thing. So a lot of it is seen as useless. Any other criticisms of the field of ideas?
They brainwash people.
Huh?
They brainwash people, that kind of.
That they brainwash people. That generally happens when people from other fields do ideas work. And we'll look at that this afternoon. So if people with the temperament of government and resources particularly, but even people with the temperament of artistry, if they do ideas work, then that tends to be the result. Oh, there's another big one. What's the other big criticism? Yes?
Maybe that their ideas can be used in the wrong way.
Well, that's, again, we're talking about the mad scientist sort of thing.
Even if it's well intended.
Even if it's well intended. Maybe that's kind of interesting. That's really interesting. That people in the field of ideas don't always take responsibility for what's done with the knowledge that they generate. Yeah. I think, I should have a plate of Maha sweets that I can give as rewards to people who say really cool things. Because that is just so totally cool. That criticism is a result of the natural detachment of the field of ideas. The people in the field of ideas were like, we're up in our own little world here, and you guys run society, and we don't really care what's going on. And sometimes the result of that is they produce knowledge without thinking about what's going to happen in society with that knowledge. No, we're just producing knowledge. What you do with that is not our business. And that's kind of the bad side of the natural detachment that's needed in the field for objective truth. And no one's ever said that before, and I really like that. Thank you. What did he say? That their knowledge can be misused and they don't take responsibility for it. What's another criticism of the field of ideas?
Pride.
Pride, thank you, that's what I was looking for. So often people outside the field of ideas feel that those in the field of ideas are prideful. Mostly that's because of their air of detachment and unsentimentality. Or you think you're better than us. Because the people in the field of ideas are often kind of in a detached, separate position. Now, is there anyone who works totally outside the fields? Are there people who don't really have careers? So my co-author, Rukmini, and I decided to call such people commensals. Those are the little fish, or the commensals, not the shark. Commensals is a biological term. It means someone who eats at the same table, but neither helps nor harms. So, students don't have careers. They're preparing for careers, but they don't have careers. Retired people don't have careers. Right? People at the end of life preparing for death, they don't have careers. Obviously, some severely handicapped, disabled people don't have careers. Now, there are also people who live like perpetual students. So there's a friend of mine in Switzerland, and she's got a JD, Juris Doctor, so she's a lawyer. She also has 2 or 3 master's degrees and I think 2 PhDs. She's 30-something, and she's never worked. And she said, my father's been supporting me, but he passed away last year. She said, I think now I have to get a job. So there are people like that who just study their whole life. Right? I mean, I'm from a Jewish background, and in traditional Jewish society, they had in every village, they wanted to have at least one person who did this. One person who just studied. They didn't teach, they didn't write, they just studied. And the village would maintain that person. I mean, it was considered a good deed if you married one of your children to someone like that and maintained them. By the way, what would be the benefit in a village of having someone who just simply studied?
If it was like a sastra service.
Well, that's mostly what they studied.
Advisor?
Yeah, I mean, they'd be basically your local Google. Right? Now, seriously, they'd be your living encyclopedia. So they were a reference person. Although they didn't actually do anything specifically to earn a livelihood. Now, we've also always had some people like this, perpetual students. They often tend to be nomadic. They often don't have a family. And they may take a few odd jobs just to bring in a little cash so that they can eat, but they never really have a career. They kind of remain as perpetual seekers. Now, in our career Dharma book, we have 2 testimonies by people in each of the fields, 1 man, 1 woman in each of the 4 fields, giving their testimony about how they work in their field dharmically. And we also have one from a commensal. All right, so it is now 12:32, so I'd like to end on time. This afternoon we'll be meeting from 2:30 to 5, which is a long session. I do want to have an actual break during that time, but I would like that when I do have that break, if you can please come back on time, if that's okay. So this afternoon we'll be going over the temperament of the people in the fields, what happens when you work in the wrong field, and then we'll do a summary of all of Career Dharma, which encompasses many things that I will not be covering in the other sessions. Thank you very much. Anything good that's here is from Srila Prabhupada and our Shastra and our Acharyas. Anything bad here is my own. Please do not even blame my co-author. Please take the good and leave aside the bad. Thank you. Hare Krishna.